Welcome to Chucky Radio. Theme music by Joseph McDade, josephmcdade.com. What is Chucky Radio? Well, I'm Chucky, and I can't tell a short story. I feel like I have to tell the full story or it's not worth telling the story. And so when I would go into storytelling mode, my friends dubbed it Chucky Radio. And now I've created a podcast so my friends and others can listen to my stories on their own time. Today's episode is Uber stories. Now, most people think Uber stories are about the Uber rides that they've been on. And I have plenty of those stories. From the Uber driver that got lost, to the Uber driver that smelled like he hasn't showered in a week. I've even had the cool Uber stories where I've had the Uber driver who turned out to be a surgeon. Yes, this guy turned out to be a surgeon from Venezuela, and he had to leave because of the situation down in Venezuela. Super cool guy. But this episode is not about my Uber riding stories. I actually drive Uber. Aside from my day job and my side jobs of producing independent film and doing this podcast, I also enjoy driving Uber. And one of the things I want to explore in this episode is Uber driving addictive. This is Chucky Radio Uber Stories. Well, one of the things I love doing on Chucky Radio is I have a guest with me. And actually, in the Chucky Radio studio, I have my guest who has become a good friend, Jahna.
Hello.
How are you doing, Jahna?
I'm doing great, Chucky.
So Jahna's been so cool to help me with this episode. And what she's done is she actually went for a ride-along with me.
I did.
We totally, when I would get an Uber ride, I would have to call the person or text them in one case and ask them, is it cool if I have this friend of mine, girl who wants to ride along with me? And so far, every time.
Yeah. Everybody's been really great about it.
They've been really cool about it. So, okay, Jahna. So before I get into talking about our experience of driving Uber or doing an Uber ride along, I wanted to tell a couple of the actual Uber stories I've experienced that I thought were a little kind of standouts, right? And so we always remember our firsts. And my first Uber drive was actually one of the most memorable drives.
Do tell.
So what had happened was I just get approved for Uber, and this is like the first time I'm going to drive, and I'm all ready to drive, and I'm getting everything set up. My car's all clean and organized and everything. And I turn on the Uber, and I'm waiting around for a little bit, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then I get the ping. And I accept a ride, and it's in my neighborhood. And so I drive over, back around to the houses back here behind the complex I live in, and I pull up. And by the way, I started Uber driving, never done anything like this before, and I do it right in the middle of ACL.
Oh, great timing.
Yeah, perfect.
Really great timing. Make the most.
We'll make the most, but when it's the most chaotic.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, anyway. And so I pull up to a house, and these were girls that were going to ACL, and they come out, and like 3 of them come out, and they get in a car. And I'm like, oh, cool. And as they're getting in, I look up, and then there's a 4th one comes. I'm like, oh, cool. And then a 5th one comes. And my car only holds 4 seats, 3 in the back, 1 in the passenger seat. So I'm like, oh, shoot. Like, what do I do? Like, this is my first Uber ride. And I've got now like 5 girls that I got there's not safety belts. I'm like worried. And I'm like, is 5 of you? And they're like, no. There's 1 more, and another girl comes out of the house.
What did you do?
I had 6 girls, and they start getting in, and so 3 of them sat in the back, and 2 of them, so I only had 1 in the front, and there's literally 5 girls in the back seat. and two of them got on the laps of the two on the outside. And I'm like nervous. I'm like getting sweaty and everything.
Of course.
And I'm like, guys, I don't know if I can do this. And they're like, oh no, it's okay. And they were like from Louisiana or something. And they're like little tiny skinny girls too. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, we're just skinny. We'll be fine. And I'm like, okay.
And did you do it, Chucky?
I did.
They talked you into it.
I didn't know what to do. This is my first Uber ride.
Right.
I mean, I'm like a virgin Uber driver. And so now I'm having to drive to downtown. And, you know, we're about 15, 20 minutes from downtown. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I can't take the highway. I'm not going to risk having these girls without safety belts and everything. So I literally had to take all the surface roads. I had to go all the way down Lamar to get down there. And it was fine. We got down there fine. Everything, they all pulled out. They're like, oh, you're so sweet and all that. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like sweating like. So another Uber driver story. This is my celebrity Uber driver story. Is I had gotten a ride request at Trulux, you know, down in the warehouse district. Mm-hmm. And I pull up and this lady comes in and I look back as she's getting in. I'm like, hi, how you doing? And I kind of recognize her, like something very familiar, you know? And I'm like, do I know you from somewhere? She goes, no. You don't know me. It was nice the way she said it. Uh-huh. And so then the boyfriend gets in the car and we drive off. The destination is somewhere over in Westlake. And I know she looked like she was really tired. And so she was kind of like zoning out. And the boyfriend and I start talking. And I'm like, okay, so she looks familiar. And he kind of looks at her and she's kind of like taking a little snooze. And he looks at me and he's like, it's Carla Gugino. She's been in a few movies. I'm like, oh. And I didn't recognize the name right off the bat. But then he goes, Spy Kids. Mm-hmm. It was the mother in Spy Kids.
Yeah.
And she was movie. Also in San Andreas. Uh-huh. That had just been out not too long before that. And that was a big movie with The Rock about the whole, you know.
I remember that.
Yeah. And now I actually see that she's doing some new cool series called Jet. So, like, it was just kind of cool to have a celebrity in the car. And so what was funny is me and the guy keep talking and we finally get to the house and he like, hey, honey, we're here. And I had mentioned to him that I was involved in independent film. And he's like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And we're just having this great conversation. And then by the time we got to the house and I was dropping him off, he was like, oh, man, is there any way we can get you again? He wanted me to be their personal Uber driver.
That's so awesome.
And I was like, oh, your Uber doesn't really work that way, but thank you. And so he goes around and she gets out and he's like, honey, he's also a filmmaker, you know, super cool guy. And she goes, oh, that's so sweet. And she gives me a kiss on the cheek.
Oh,
and I was just like, wow.
That's so lovely, Chucky. So
here I am, like, driving Uber, and the next thing I know, I'm getting a kiss on the cheek by Carla Gugino.
That's so good.
So that was my celebrity Uber drive. But the one Uber drive I'll say that was a little scary was I picked a guy up on an Uber ride. And this is like 3 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. And Uber didn't require you to put in a destination when you asked for an Uber. You could literally just request an Uber and have no destination in there. And so I pull up to this like dark parking lot at some office building. It was like 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Cue the horror music. Here it comes.
And so this guy gets in, he's carrying like a backpack. He gets right up in the front seat with me. And I'm like, hey, man, how's it going? And he goes, hey, like all one-line responses. And so I'm like, and I, turn on the app and there's no destination. I'm like, all right, where are we going? Do you have a destination? He's like, I'll tell you where to go. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, just get on the highway and go north. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm just like, so were you working tonight? And he's like, yep. I mean, it was just like that. It was
very
like
short answers.
Really short, like did not want to get in the conversation. And so I'm just cruising up the highway now because this guy picked him up right off of 35. And so we're on 35 northbound. And then he's like, all right, take the next exit. And I'm like, okay. So I get off. And he's like, take a left. And we pull into the strip center. And he's going into a store, actually, because he's kind of a buff guy. And it was like a GNC. Like he was going to go get protein or something. I don't know. And I'm just like, I don't know what's up with this guy. He won't put in a destination. And I mean, I literally thought of bailing right there. Like I was just going to end the ride and take off.
Right.
And if he gives me a shitty rating, so be it. But he all of a sudden pops back out and he gets back in the car. And I'm like, all right, buddy, well, where we going? Just get back on the highway.
Okay. And then what did you do?
So I just kept driving up like a few more miles. He tells me to get off again. Then we go into this neighborhood, like a little bit sketchy neighborhood. And I'm just like, what the fuck have I got myself into?
No kidding.
I'm just like, who knows what this guy has in the bag? He's sitting in the front seat with me, which I thought, well, I guess I'd rather have a psychopath in the front seat rather than behind me, right?
Maybe.
And we end up like, as we're pulling into the neighborhood, I just try to like create conversation. Just honestly, in the back of my mind, I'm like, if I make myself very human, he won't want to kill me.
Oh, relatable.
No, seriously, that was in the back of my mind. I was saying something about like, hey, nice giving you a ride. Oh, did you get what you needed in the store? I mean, I'm just trying to talk just to be a little bit personable. Just like, if this guy turns out to be a psychopath, maybe he'll say, all right, this guy's too human. He's not another piece of meat.
He
or
won't
something.
want to hurt you.
And then we pulled up. He's like, this is the house. I'm like, I stopped, and he gets out.
And that was it.
That was it.
And you lived.
And I lived.
Chucky, you survived.
So that was one of, I've probably given, I think my thing says somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 plus rides.
Wow.
So I don't want to discourage people from driving Uber. And now you can't ask for an Uber unless you put a destination in. So it would prevent that kind of situation.
Right. You know where you're supposed to be going.
Exactly. So those are my first Uber ride, my celebrity Uber ride, and my scary Uber ride. So Jahna, now you've gotten to actually experience riding Uber. You did the ride along with me.
I did a ride along. It was very fun.
So part of the reason I wanted to talk about Uber stories is I'm kind of fascinated by the adrenaline rush I get when I ride Uber. I mean, it's almost addictive. I mean, I'll start and I'll just do it for fun and I'll pick up a couple rides, but I'll meet somebody really interesting. And now I'm like, I'm going to keep driving. I want to keep trying to meet fun, interesting people. And so what did you experience? What did you think riding with me tonight?
Well, I would say it was interesting because I think they all had a different story to tell or different experiences to talk about. They were all quite nice and nice enough to let me ride along as well.
Well, and that was a cool thing, right?
Yeah.
Like I had to call and ask if it was cool. Or in the one case I texted because they didn't pick up the phone and they were all like, sure, no problem. And I guess from the perspective of meeting new people and learning new things, I mean, did you enjoy it? Was it a little bit of a rush? Or?
Definitely. Yeah. It was very fun because we did not know who we would pick up next. And we would drop someone off. And before you even could get to the next sentence out, there was somebody else needing a ride.
Right.
It was really fun. And then we got stuck on Rainy Street area for a little while and got to people watch over there. It was pretty fun.
So that's the thing. It's fun. And I think we kind of talked about this earlier tonight, but there's almost like this, you'll have no idea what you're going to get next.
Right. You don't know who you're going to meet.
So there's kind of like this interesting, mysterious kind of like, it's almost like a kid like can't wait to open the Cracker Jack box to see what's that prize I'm going to get, right?
Right. Especially you, Chucky, you meet celebrities and so forth whenever you go Uber driving, or lots of piles of girls in your car.
Oh my God. I don't know how it happens, but it just happens. I think every Uber driver has experienced some
You
of
never
that.
know what the Cracker Jack box is going to bring you.
You don't. So I will say that Uber driving is a bit of a rush. It's almost addictive.
Mm-hmm. And you get paid for it.
And I make money doing
Right.
it. Like, that's the other thing. Like, I think some people get kind of a kick out of meeting new people by going to a bar by themselves or going to a coffee shop and just engaging people. And I do a little bit of that too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about driving Uber. Because number one, like if you end up blowing an afternoon doing it, hey, I made $50. I made $75.
Exactly. Right.
But the other side, which is really interesting, if you meet somebody at a bar and you're kind of like tired of them, they're still there. You can like walk away, but now you got to go to a whole nother bar or something.
Mm-hmm.
With Uber rides, they only last for the ride. So there's a plus and a minus. The plus is like if you get somebody that's weird or different or like you have a quick conversation, well, it's done. It's over. You're going to drop them off. The minus is every now and then you meet somebody really cool and you want to keep talking to them, but the Uber ride's over. And I kind of feel as an Uber driver, it's never my place to like try to ask someone for any of their information because there's kind of like a almost, it's like taking a cab. There's a anonymity about it. And I like that. I mean, as an Uber rider, like, I don't know who this Uber driver is, and I don't want him to have my information either. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I always try to kind of keep that respect. So there's one time when I gave an Uber ride, and I almost, like, went the ballsy move. So I pick up these two girls in downtown.
Oh, I want to hear this story.
And they turned out to be British.
Wow, I love that accent.
Oh my God. And so these two cute girls, and they're like, I would say around 30, early 30s. And they're sitting there talking with their British accents and everything. And so I'm like, oh, so where are you guys from? And they're like, oh, we're from England. Oh, cool, but what part of England? And so they're like, I forget, one of them was from a town near Manchester. My brother-in-law before, he was from Leland. I was like, oh, Leland, really? And then one of them was up near Scotland, and my sister, they lived in Edinburgh for a while. And so I'm like, oh, okay. Like my sister lived in Edinburgh. So like immediately they're like, oh shit, this guy, like, he knows, he travels and all that. And so I just start talking to him, and we start talking about travel. And in fact, I mentioned to them that I was going to Bali later this year. And they're like, really? You're going to Bali? And they just like,
Bali?
You're going to Bali? And so the cool thing was, like, I could just tell. They're like, wait a second. This is not like the normal Uber driver, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as we're getting to the destination, I realized I was dropping them off at Justine's, which I love Justine's.
Yes.
Great food.
Great place.
Amazing pork chop. And so as I'm pulling up, like, oh, you guys are going to Justine. This place is great. By the way, the pork chop here is amazing. And like, oh, thank you so much. And like, as they're getting out, I'm thinking to myself, because we like had this really good rapport. And I was this close, and I didn't do it, but I was this close to like, I looked back at them and they looked at me and they smiled like they wanted to see me. Mm-hmm. Like, who is this guy? Mm-hmm. And I almost went, hey, I haven't eaten yet. If you guys don't mind, I'll join you. And that would have been the first time to really like engage an Uber ride, but I chickened out and I didn't say it. I didn't do it.
And then you never saw them again.
And I never saw them again. These cute British girls. Oh, I'm sorry. These cute British women. These cute British
women.
No, British young ladies.
I like that story. That was a good one.
Is that a fun one?
I like it a lot.
So, that's my Uber stories. It is a bit addictive. Anything to add, Jahna?
What will it take for you to stop driving Uber, Chucky?
Oh my God. That is a tough question.
Tell me. What will it take?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm addicted. It's interesting and it's fun to meet just a diverse group of people. You know, when I've driven Uber around the festivals like South by Southwest and ACL, you get a lot of foreign people that are in town that want to come to the big festival and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll get people from South America, from Europe, stuff like that. Obviously, the British girls are an example. British. Jahna, to answer your question, I don't know what it'll take for me to stop driving Uber.
I won't intervene yet, Chucky.
Thank you. Well, Jahna, thank you so much for coming on and helping me with this Chucky Radio podcast.
It's been really fun. It's been great. Thank you for having me.
So thank you for listening to Chucky Radio. If you like this podcast, please give me a review, give me a rating. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, I'm on Spotify, or just through my host site, which is Buzzsprout. This is Chucky Love. Peace and love, my brothers and sisters.